You've tried everything. The sound machine, the warm tea, the deep breathing. You've replayed the same worship playlist so many nights it no longer moves you. And still, you lay there, eyes open in the dark, heart pounding in the silence, soul trembling under a weight you can't name. You say you're tired, but it's not your body, it's your spirit that's exhausted. There's a rest the world cannot give, and you've come to the edge of its absence. There's something cruel about lying awake when you've done all the right things. You've prayed, you've asked, you've even whispered promises you weren't sure you could keep. God, if you just help me tonight, I'll change everything. But all you hear is the rhythm of your own heartbeat, fast, anxious, too loud, like a reminder that heaven hasn't answered yet. And maybe no one told you that even Jesus lost sleep. In Gethsemane, he knelt alone. His friends couldn't stay awake, and the weight of what was coming pressed so hard into him that blood came through his pores. He begged, yes, begged, and for another way. And in that moment, heaven was still. The Father did not lift the cup. And yet, Jesus prayed. He didn't fight sleep that night because of restlessness. He fought it because obedience cost him peace. And you, lying in your own Gethsemane, are learning what he already knew. Peace doesn't always come before surrender. Sometimes it only follows it. St. John Paul II once said, "Prayer joined to sacrifice constitutes the most powerful force in human history." Maybe your sleepless nights are a hidden altar. Maybe this quiet ache is an invitation to kneel where Jesus knelt, not to be rescued from the night, but to find the one who sits with you in it. This prayer, this secret Jesus carried in the garden, was not about escaping suffering. It was about trusting the Father enough to rest in his will. And in that trust, sleep comes. Not the shallow kind, but the kind that enters a soul that's finally laid its burdens down. If this story has already touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments, what do you think God is trying to show us through this? Now let's continue. There is a kind of exhaustion that sleep can't fix. A weight that slips beneath the skin, hiding behind smiles and "I'm fine," masquerading as strength, while the soul quietly cries out for release. And when the night comes, when the world goes still and the noise of distraction fades, that's when the weight becomes unbearable. Not because it's heavier at night, but because finally you're forced to feel it. St. John Paul II spoke often about the suffering of the heart, not just physical suffering, but the kind that lives in the secret spaces of the soul. It is suffering, more than anything else, which clears the way for the grace which transforms human souls, he said. But no one talks about how long that transformation takes. No one warns you that peace often comes slower than pain. And in this silence, the enemy whispers, "Where is your God now?" he says. If he loved you, you wouldn't feel this broken. The whispers aren't always loud. Sometimes they sound like your own voice, doubts wrapped in your own tone, fears wearing your own face. That's why the weight feels so personal, like you're the only one carrying it. But you are not alone. Even Jesus knew the weight of sorrow. Isaiah called him a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. Not just a visitor of pain, he knew it, lived it, walked in it. And when he said, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened," he wasn't offering empty comfort. He was offering shared suffering, a yoke that fits because he's already carried the heavier end. So what do you do when your soul forgets how to rest? You stop performing. You stop pretending. You bring the weight, raw, unedited, to the foot of a Savior who does not flinch at your heaviness. And in that place, a strange thing happens, not all at once. But slowly, like dawn cracking over the hills, you begin to feel something different, a loosening, a surrender, a quiet knowing that you are seen, even in the dark. You may not feel peace yet, but peace is not a feeling. It is a person, and he is near. If this story has already touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments, what do you think God is trying to show us through this? Now, let's continue. There is a moment in the life of every believer when God goes quiet. Not because he has left, but because he is forming something in you that words could never accomplish. Yet in that silence, It's easy to mistake his stillness for abandonment. You cry out, plead, wait, and nothing changes. The night feels endless, and your prayers hang in the air like unfinished sentences, and that's when the fear begins to creep in. You start to wonder if you've done something wrong, if maybe your faith wasn't strong enough, if God has turned his face from you. But hear this, God's silence is not his absence. His quiet is not his rejection. In fact, it may be the clearest sign that he is preparing you for something deeper than comfort. He is preparing you for communion. St. John Paul II, who knew suffering, solitude, and the agony of unanswered prayer, once said, "Do not abandon yourselves to despair." We are the Easter people and Hallelujah is our song. But what he didn't ignore was the fact that every Easter must pass through Gethsemane. Every resurrection comes after silence. And that silence, it tests your roots. Jesus himself experienced it on the cross. My God, why have you forsaken me?" That cry wasn't staged, it was real, raw, human. But even in that moment, he was quoting scripture, Psalm 22, a psalm that begins in anguish but ends in triumph. Because Jesus, even in abandonment, never lost his grip on the Father's promises. Can you hold on like that? Can you whisper truth to yourself when heaven seems deaf? That is the secret prayer in the night. It is not just "God help me sleep," but "God, even if you don't speak tonight, I still believe you are good." There's a kind of faith that only grows in silence, a kind of peace that only comes when everything else has failed. This is the soil where spiritual maturity is born, not in answered prayers, but in the resolve to trust when there is no reply. Your sleepless nights may not be punishment. They may be pilgrimage, and God, though silent, is closer than your breath. If this story has already touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments. What do you think God is trying to show us through this? Now let's continue. There's a rest that doesn't come from a mattress or a dark room or a quiet house. There's a deeper kind, the kind that seeps into the marrow of your being, the kind that can't be shaken by circumstances or stolen by fear. But this kind of rest is not given freely to the casual believer. It is unlocked by surrender, and that surrender almost always costs something. You cannot sleep in peace if your soul is still wrestling against the will of God. We want God to give us rest while we remain in rebellion, while we cling to bitterness, while we refuse to forgive, while we live with divided hearts. But the rest Jesus offers, the kind he modeled in his darkest hours, was born out of radical obedience. Not passive acceptance, obedience. Not my will, but yours be done. These are not gentle words. They are words forged in agony, whispered by the Son of God as his closest friends slept and his enemies gathered. Yet even there, in the garden soaked with holy sweat and dread, peace broke through. Because peace does not come after the battle. It comes the moment you stop fighting God. St. John Paul II taught that peace is not merely the absence of war, but the presence of justice, of truth, of love. And where does that begin, if not in the hidden places of our lives, when no one is watching? When we choose to obey the whisper of the Spirit instead of the screams of our flesh. When we lay down our demands, our timelines, our justifications, and say, "Yes, Lord," even when it hurts. It is not easy. But neither was the cross. And yet, Jesus walked toward it with resolve, because he had already found rest in the Father's will. Some of you are sleepless not because of anxiety, but because your spirit is in conflict. You want the peace of Christ, but you resist the path that leads to it. Let tonight be different. Let tonight be the beginning of obedience, not out of fear, but out of love. A love that trusts God enough to follow him into the unknown. Because on the other side of surrender is the kind of rest that can cradle even the most tormented soul into holy sleep. If this story has already touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments, what do you think God is trying to show us through this? Now let's continue. There are seasons when God's presence is not loud or overwhelming. It doesn't split the sky or shake the walls. It doesn't rush in like fire or thunder. Sometimes it simply abides, steady, unshaken, and unnoticed until you realize you're not alone. It's the presence that keeps you from breaking when everything inside you feels shattered. It's what holds your mind together when anxiety claws at your chest. It's what softens your heart when bitterness begins to take root. And in the stillness of sleepless nights, it's what whispers to your soul, "I am here. I have not left you." So many of us look for God in the noise, in the miracle, in the dramatic. But Jesus often came in gentleness. A baby in a manger, a quiet carpenter, a teacher who walked dusty roads. And even after the resurrection, he didn't appear with spectacle. He revealed himself to a weeping woman in a garden, to doubters in a locked room, to travelers on a road, walking beside them like a stranger until their hearts burned with recognition. That's what his presence does. It walks beside you unnoticed until something in you starts to awaken. A memory, a verse, a sigh that suddenly turns into a prayer. That is how peace begins to rise, not from the absence of struggle, but from the assurance that someone is with you in it. St. John Paul II once said, "Be not afraid. Open wide the doors to Christ. Not just in church, not just in joy, but in the night, in the doubt, in the longing for sleep that never comes." If you can open the door of your fear, your restlessness, your control, you'll find him already standing there. You may not feel him, that's okay. Faith was never about feelings. It was always about trust. The kind of trust that lies down and says, "Even here, even now, I believe you are with me." That is the secret prayer of Jesus. Not the removal of the night, but the embrace of the Father's nearness within it. And when his presence is enough, sleep doesn't need to be perfect. Because your soul will know what your body forgets, that you are not abandoned. You are held. If this story has already touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments. What do you think God is trying to show us through this? Now let's continue. There is a kind of peace that doesn't make sense. A peace that doesn't come after the storm, but right in the middle of it, when the winds are howling and nothing around you has changed, and yet you find yourself breathing slower, standing still, heart calm. This is not man-made peace. This is not denial or numbness. This is the peace Jesus promised. "My peace I give to you, not as the world gives." The world's peace is circumstantial. It's fragile, based on control, a cleared schedule, a clean bill of health, a certain outcome. But the peace of Christ is rooted in trust. It lives beyond logic. It settles over you not when your life is fixed, but when your spirit is yielded. St. Paul called it the peace that surpasses all understanding. And that kind of peace doesn't come from analyzing your pain, but from surrendering it. It comes when you stop asking why and start whispering, "Yes, Lord," even when you're scared, even when you don't know what tomorrow holds. Because peace is not the absence of the unknown, it's the presence of the one who knows everything. St. John Paul II often spoke of this kind of peace as a fruit of prayer, but not just any prayer. Prayer that flows from trust and total abandonment into the hands of the Father. In prayer, we enter the heart of God, he said, and in that place, there is nothing to fear. There, even your restless thoughts begin to bow. Even your racing heart starts to quiet. Maybe the reason you haven't slept is because your soul is still trying to carry what God asked you to lay down. Maybe you've been reciting prayers without releasing anything, but peace requires release. It asks for your control, your questions, your rights, your pain, all of it surrendered into his hands, not perfectly, not once and for all, but continually, like breathing, like resting. And suddenly sleep becomes holy. Not just a biological need, but a spiritual act of trust, an embodied way of saying, "God, I believe you are holding my life, even while I sleep." This is the secret Jesus knew, that even in agony, even on the edge of betrayal and death, there was peace in the Father's will. And that peace carried him through the night. If this story has already touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments. What do you think God is trying to show us through this? Now, let's continue. Some prayers are not spoken with words. They're breathed through tears, whispered in silence, lived out in the waiting. And sometimes, the most powerful prayer you can pray is simply lying down and trusting God enough to close your eyes. That's what Jesus did. In the storm, with waves crashing and seasoned fishermen panicking, Jesus slept. Not because the danger wasn't real, not because he was pretending it wasn't happening. He slept because his peace didn't come from the sea. It came from the one who made it. That sleep was not weakness. It was trust in its purest form. And tonight that same trust is being offered to you. St. John Paul II, in the quiet power of his witness, reminded us that rest is not unspiritual. It is sacred. It is trust made flesh. To rest in God is not to escape the world, but to see it rightly through His eyes. That's what sleep can become. Not a failure to handle your life, but a living declaration. God, I am not you, and I don't have to be. The secret prayer of Jesus was not just in Gethsemane and not just on the sea. It was in every moment He chose to entrust Himself fully to the Father. That trust was His rhythm. That obedience was His rest, and through Him it becomes yours. So tonight, when you lay your head down, don't fight for sleep. Don't perform for peace. Let your bed become your altar. Let your stillness be your surrender. And before you close your eyes, let this prayer rise from the deepest place in you, even if it's only a whisper. Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. I release what I cannot carry. I choose to rest in your will. Be with me in this night, and let your presence cradle me into peace. That is the secret prayer, not hidden because it is complex, but because it requires total surrender. And for those who dare to pray it, for those who stop striving and start trusting, something shifts. Sleep may not come instantly. The night may still feel long. But your soul will rest first. And when your soul rests, your body will follow. Because peace is not the end of the story. Peace is a person who never sleeps and never leaves. He holds you, even now. If this story has already touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments, what do you think God is trying to show us through this? And if you're ready, let go and rest in Him tonight. There's something holy about the moment the sky begins to shift, when the black of night softens into deep blue, and the first light stretches quietly across the horizon. It doesn't shout, it doesn't rush, it just comes. Faithful, steady, certain, like God. You've endured nights that felt endless, hours where time seemed frozen in sorrow, silence and waiting. But no night lasts forever. The same God who watched with you in the dark is the one who commands the dawn. Not just the one outside your window, but the one rising in your spirit. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. That's not just a poetic promise, it's the rhythm of resurrection. It's the pattern Jesus walked through: suffering, surrender, silence, and then light. St. John Paul II often returned to this hope, that no cross is without resurrection, that every soul who walks through the valley of shadow is met by the one who conquered it. And if Christ lives in you, then hope is your inheritance, not wishful thinking, not denial, but anchored, blood-bought, spirit-breathed hope. So take heart. The fact that you're still here and still believing, still seeking, still breathing is evidence that darkness did not win. The morning is coming, not just outside your window, but inside your soul. Rest now. The light is near.